All right. Well, welcome to our third Lent Contemplative morning. We're very happy to be here with you. And as you know, Kaleid is a place where women see ourselves, others, in our communities through new lenses, and we call our group circles. These are spaces where we invite God to help us see by deepening our prayer and broadening our understanding and practicing new habits so that we can follow Jesus with more clarity and compassion and courage. And this circle is a space of deepening prayer. I read a quote this week about why contemplative prayer is so good, and it just reminded me, and I thought I'd share it with you as we begin today. It says, when we were children, most of us were good friends with mystery. The world was full of it, and we loved it. And then as we grew older, we slowly accepted the indoctrination, that mystery exists only to be solved. For many of us, mystery became an adversary. Unknowing became a weakness. The contemplative spiritual life is an ongoing reversal of this adjustment. It is a slow and sometimes painful process of becoming as little children again, in which we first make friends again with mystery and finally fall in love again with it. So we're happy to be here on the journey together. And we're also in the journey of Lent, which, as we know, is a place where we kind of intentionally put ourselves into God's story by willingly participating in the wilderness journeys of Jesus and of Israel. We might not be in a life wilderness season in our real life. Some of us are. But in Lent, we practice trusting God's presence and provision in wilderness spaces. And we do that with our bodies, with actual practices, so that we are ready when those things do come. What we do with our bodies trains our heart. And then when we have need to trust God in the wilderness seasons, we are practiced at that. And so Lent reminds us that we are always part of a God story that has been unfolding since the beginning, and that will come to a good end at the last. As we fast or pray or serve during Lent, we recognize and strip away the things that are poor substitutes for what we really need. And we notice and add what we and the world need: compassionate, hopeful connection with God and with one another. So Lent practices train us to trust God's provision and presence in the wilderness. And we're flexing our trust muscles together with prayer postures from Psalm 23 and the Ignatian Examen. And Psalm 23 is reminding us of what is true of our Good Shepherd in the wilderness. The first week, we practice lying down and allowing God to settle us. Last week, we did some cat-cow posture moves, allowing us to lead us and fill us beside quiet waters. This week, we're going to do another body prayer as we think about the phrase, "He restores my soul," or as Eugene Peterson writes in the message, "God lets me catch my breath." So today, we'll practice again together with our bodies and invite you to carry this prayer into your week. And then we will move into the Ignatian Examen. But I will begin by reading the psalm, again from the Message version. It says this: God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You have bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath and send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through Death Valley, I'm not afraid when you walk at my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head. My cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life. I'm back home in the house of God for the rest of my life. In our wilderness journey of human frailty, our Good Shepherd is the one who made us in love and by love and for love. And this same one restores our soul and lets us catch our breath. I was curious as I looked at various translations of this week's phrase that it's actually translated quite differently, imagery-wise, in different translations. It says things like, He restores my soul. You let me catch my breath. He keeps me alive. My life, He brings back. And I just find it curious that there are so many ways to image this beautiful picture of God, the shepherd, bending low, breathing me back to life so that I can be restored and be alive. So I wonder, as I read them again, what images come to your mind? You may want to close your eyes and just let a picture pop into your head. He restores my soul. You let me catch my breath. He keeps me alive. My life, He brings back. When I picture these phrases, I think about a creature once filled with vitality, purpose, confidence, but who is now deflated or defeated, perhaps a sheep or a lamb who has had a bad scare, or one who is ill and can go no further, or maybe one just diminished from the weariness of the journey or from outrunning enemies. The phrase in Hebrew, again, interestingly to me, is just two words, shuv, which means to retrieve or to restore. So we can understand why those are different translations. And nefesh, which we talked about last week, my soul, my throat, my vital self. So the shepherd retrieves and restores my soul, my vitality, my breath, and gives it back to me whole again. Author K.J. Ramsey, in The Lord is My Courage, shares that our nervous system responds in tiers like a ladder under stress. She's a trauma therapist, so she kind of writes from that perspective. But she says in our most regulated state, which is called the ventral vagal state, we are able to be fully present and connected to ourselves and to others and to life. But when we feel threatened or overwhelmed, we are familiar, we might feel like a racing heart or a tight chest. And this is an expression of the sympathetic state of our nervous system. And this is what she kind of thinks of as the middle of the ladder. And in this state, we feel anxiety or anger or the strong urge to protect ourselves from harm. And sometimes we do the fight or flight there. But if the stress continues or if the danger is too great, we drop in our bodies further down the nervous system ladder and go into shutdown mode, freezing or numbing or disconnecting. This is called the dorsal vagal state. And to come back up to ventral vagal wholeness, where we can be present, two things are very helpful for humans: breathing and the co-regulating presence of another who is safe and who sees us. And Psalm 23 tells us that our good shepherd is the one who does this. God brings back our vitality, our ability to breathe and to be present in safety and with engagement in the world. Our good shepherd is the co-regulating presence who finds us and is with us in our fear, breathes us back from breathlessness, carries us up the ladder, and brings us home. This week, we're going to practice God's presence and provision again, letting God restore us to an undefended and secure state, filling us again with life and breath. And so today, our Lenten prayer posture is one of filling our whole bodies with breath as we practice trusting that God will restore us. Sarah Nell is going to lead us through that practice.
Our posture this morning can be done sitting or standing. So you can decide what you'd rather do. And it's a relaxed rhythm of consciously welcoming our breath into our lungs and allowing it to return into the world again. So if you'd like, you may turn off your screen and move from your seated position to standing, or if you want, you can sit sit tall where you are. So I invite you to take 3 deep, slow breaths. Oftentimes we breathe out of our chest, but if we can begin to move our breath down, filling our belly. I invite you now to open your heart space by sending your shoulders up and back and down so that you have an expectant and receptive posture. I invite you to consider for a moment, where in the wilderness season do you need a restorative breath? Where do you need vitality of soul? Where do you need God to return you to an undefeated and secure state of being? I invite you to join me in the first part of this movement. With your arms down by your side and your palms faced up and open, I invite you to bring your arms up, lifting them above your head, and bringing your palms together. And now bring those prayer hands down to your heart space. And hold there for a moment. Now I invite you to take a deep breath and with your palms together, raise your hands again above your head. And then let them fall down by your side. We'll repeat that together. As we practice this movement, I invite you to add breath to it. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. Exhale, sending your breath out into the world. And I invite you, if you'd like, to add to these breaths a prayer. May breathe in, you restore my soul, and breathe out, I can breathe. Or, you restore my soul, and I am safe. You restore my soul. I am safe. You restore my soul. I can breathe. And just take your time as you repeat this movement and these breath prayers, whatever rhythm feels right to you this morning. Your movement and your breath are a prayer offered to God, our Good Shepherd. I invite you now to listen as I read the psalm again. And as I read, receive it as a gift of God's presence and provision. Listen for God's invitation to you to trust in the wilderness places. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He lets me rest in grassy meadows. He leads me to restful waters. He keeps me alive. He guides me in proper paths for the sake of his good name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no danger because you are with me. You are my rod and your staff. They protect me. You set a table for me right in front of my enemies. You bathe my head in oil. My cup is so full, it spills over. Yes, goodness and faithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the Lord's house as long as I live.
Thank you, Sarah Nell. You're welcome to stay where you are if you'd like, or come back to your seated position in your chair as we move into the next part of our practice together, which is the Examen. Having returned to your chair or found your comfortable position, I invite you to just take your attention, your own presence, to the Lord's presence with you. Know yourself in the Lord's presence and allow God's love, the love of the Good Shepherd, to surround you and to fill you and to hold you, trusting it and receiving it this morning as deeply as you are able. The first movement of the prayer of Examen is gratitude. As you sit in awareness of your own soul, of your life, and perhaps your wilderness, and of God's life-giving presence and provision, allow a few things for which you're particularly grateful right now to come to your mind. And as you do, just tell God that you're thankful. We'll spend a few minutes here. The second movement of the Examen is to remember consolations. So now I invite you to let some memories of yesterday come to you. Review your last 24 hours and recall, when were the moments that you were particularly aware of God's provision for you? Were there moments when you felt restored or revitalized through another person or through some encounter in the natural world? Were there any moments when you could breathe more deeply, where you felt restored by the Spirit and found you had what you needed? How did you sense God's presence in those moments? As you reflect, hold those places of consolation up to the caring gaze of your Good Shepherd. The third movement of the prayer is recalling desolations. Again, go back through your last 24 hours with the Holy Spirit as your guide. When were you unaware of God's presence or in doubt about God's provision? Where did stress or unsettledness disconnect you from the reality of God's care? Were there times when you felt breathless, anxious, or even frozen and drained of vitality? Allow those places of desolation to be held in the gaze of the love of the shepherd who brings back breath to your lungs and life to your soul. The final movement of the prayer of Examen is to take some time to respond to God. So I invite you to turn toward today and consider what it holds. Where will you be going? What would it look like to be aware of God's presence leading you and regulating you today? Where do you need God to be with you? What provisions will you need? Where might you need God to breathe life into you today? Imagine yourself walking into specific moments today with the Lord as your shepherd. Visit with God now about what you need. Ask for breath, for openness, for vitality, for courage. When you're ready visiting with the Lord, I invite you to return to the group. Every time we meet, as you know, we take moments to share with each other what God shared with us in our practice, if we'd like, and it is always a gift, but of course, it is never an obligation. I'm going to close our time today with a sweet poem. I've been coming across all kinds of sweet poems lately. I'm thankful for that. I think I shared with you all a book of poetry that I've been enjoying by Malcolm Guite called Word in the Wilderness. If you have any attraction to poetry, I highly recommend it. This was not in that book, but I found it this week, so I share it with you. And it's about, is it Anna who's in the temple? I think. It's her story, and I thought it was a story of being restored and revitalized. Widows of Jerusalem. I, too, was once young enough to believe my life mattered. When I woke, the sun rose for me. I tucked lilies in my hair. Now I am 80 years, a temple dweller. What a wonder of faith, they proclaim. Truth is, I cry in the dark. I beg priests for bread and pick insects from my hymn. But today, an infant came to be blessed. He curled into the crook of my arm, and when his eyes wandered to mine, I remembered every hope stored in my childhood's heart. Gazelles and henna shrubs, dove perched in the crags. I touched his face, that skin we were meant to wear forever. I hope you all have a day that is full of beauty and life and breath for your hearts. We will see you again next week.